Only I showed up to say goodbye to my wife. Our son wasn't there. Our daughter didn't come. Not one grandchild made an appearance. Just me, standing beside her coffin while bitter wind tore through the chapel courtyard, like it was trying to chase away even the weather itself. Before I share what happened next and how one funeral changed everything about my family, let me ask you something. Take a second and subscribe to this channel. Then leave a comment about where you're from. That small action helps my story find the people who might need to hear it. And believe me, what comes next will stay with you. The funeral director couldn't hide his discomfort. His gaze kept darting between the rows of vacant chairs in my face, like he was hoping anyone, might still walk through those doors. He coughed awkwardly. "Sir, would you like us to hold off a bit longer? Maybe give them more time?" I shook my head. "No, let's begin." Catherine hated when things ran behind schedule. Even during her final weeks, she stuck to routines like they were lifelines. Pills at exactly the right hour. Her evening shows at 7 on the dot. Slippers lined up perfectly next to bed every night before she climbed under the covers. She lived with precision and grace. Now she was being laid to rest with only one person who cared enough to witness it. I took my seat in the front row. 5 empty chairs surrounded me on both sides. The minister went through the motions, reading passages that fell hollow in the vast emptiness of that room. Someone had ordered too many flowers. They crowded the space with their brightness, their aggressive cheerfulness feeling almost mocking. The casket gleamed under the lights, polished to an almost painful shine. I kept thinking Catherine would have found the whole production ridiculous. All this money spent on appearances. Then she would have looked around with that sharp expression of hers and asked the question burning in my mind. Where are our children? That morning, I received exactly one text from our son Daniel. 7 words. Can't make it. Something came up. Sorry. Nothing more. No explanation. No follow-up call. I could picture him clearly. Probably sitting in some conference room, or more likely out on a golf course schmoozing clients, telling himself his mother's funeral was unfortunate timing, but these things happen. Life goes on. Business won't wait. Our daughter, Rachel, hadn't even sent a text. 2 days before Catherine died, she left a rambling voicemail. "Dad, listen, I can't possibly cancel my appointment at the spa. You know how my anxiety gets when I have to change my schedule. Tell Mom I'll swing by to see her sometime next week. Okay? Next week." Like death operates on a waiting list. Like her mother could just hold on until Rachel's calendar cleared up. When the service ended, I walked behind the hired pallbearers, men who'd never met my wife, never heard her laugh, never tasted her cooking or heard her opinions on anything. They were just doing a job. I hadn't cried yet, not because the grief wasn't there. God knows I've been living inside it for months, watching Catherine slowly disappear, holding her hand to the worst of the pain. But some sorrows run so deep, they turn to stone inside you. They don't flow out as tears. They just sit there, heavy and immovable, crushing everything around them. The cemetery stretched out quiet and nearly empty. An old maintenance worker stood far back near a utility shed, leaning on his shovel, respectful but distant. The coffin descended with mechanical efficiency. Final prayers got whispered into wind. Earth would soon cover polished wood. We would soon hold only silence and memory. I remained standing there long after everyone else had packed up and driven away. My good shoes sank into the damp ground. Wind grabbed at my coat, pulling and tugging like it wanted me gone too. They'd install the proper headstone later. They'd told me. For now, just a temporary metal marker. Catherine and Morrison, beloved wife and mother. The word that stuck in my mind, sharp and painful, was forgotten. When I finally made it home, the silence felt physically loud. Her favorite armchair sat exactly as she'd left it, a mystery novel face down on the armrest marking her place. Her coffee mug, the one with the faded college logo, sat washed and waiting in the dish rack. The television remote lay on the side table where she'd set it down before that final trip to the hospital. I stood looking at these objects, these fragments of a life, for longer than I should have. Then I moved to the kitchen and reached for the bottle of good whiskey I kept high up in the cabinet, save for occasions that never quite seemed special enough. I poured a generous amount into a glass and pulled out my phone. I don't spend much time on social media. Never saw the point. But something made me open Facebook that evening, some instinct I couldn't quite name. Rachel's page was set to public naturally. She'd posted something 3 hours earlier, right about the time they were lowering her mother into the ground. The photo showed her in a group of women at some upscale restaurant, fancy drinks in their hands, everyone grinning wide. The words underneath made my stomach turn. Best day with my girls. Unlimited mimosas and zero responsibilities. This is what living looks like. Followed by a string of celebratory emojis. Daniel had posted too. I found it after scrolling for a minute. A shot taken on a pristine golf course. His expensive new club catching the sunlight just right. His caption bragged about perfect conditions and successful business dealings. I stared at that screen until my vision started to blur, until the images lost all meaning. Then I powered the phone off completely, drained what was left of my glass, and turned my attention to a framed photograph hanging on the wall. Catherine and me, taken on our 38th wedding anniversary, standing in front of the rose garden she'd spent 3 summers cultivating. Those roses used to explode with red blooms every June. Now the bushes look skeletal and abandoned. Tomorrow, I decided, setting my empty glass down with careful deliberation. Tomorrow I'm calling the attorney. I'll make changes, quiet changes, done with the same dignity Catherine showed throughout her entire life. If I was the only person who showed up to honor her passing, then I'd be the only person who got to decide what happened to everything we'd built together. Their inheritance, their assumptions about what they were owed, all of it was about to change. That night, I sat in our kitchen, the same space where Catherine used to bake pies from scratch, where she'd stand at the counter rolling dough with flour up to her elbows, humming softly to whatever was playing on the radio. She always saved me the corner pieces, the ones with extra cinnamon. The room felt massive now, cold and hollow. Fruit rotted slowly in a bowl on the counter. Nobody had thought to throw it out. The silence wasn't completely foreign to me. Catherine had been gone 3 weeks already, those final days in hospice care. I'd been learning what loneliness felt like. But tonight it pressed against me with new weight, suffocating and inescapable. I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. Those empty chairs. Rachel's Facebook post celebrating while her mother was being buried. The complete absence of acknowledgement, of grief, of basic human decency. I'd raised a daughter who could watch her mother's funeral from a restaurant table, laughing over cocktails. Where'd I gone wrong? Or had she simply chosen to become someone I no longer recognized? Someone whose moral compass had been lost somewhere along the way? Daniel's text sat on my phone like evidence of something criminal. Something came up. Was he ashamed? Did he feel anything at all? Or had he reached that point where other people's pain, even his own mother's death, barely registered as real? I poured more whiskey, not from sadness exactly, but from a clarity that was starting to form, cold and sharp as broken glass. I made my way down the hallway to our bedroom, each footstep echoing in the quiet house. The old oak desk sat in the corner, same place it had been for 40 years. I opened the top drawer and found everything still arranged exactly how Catherine had left it. Organized, labeled, intentional. I reached past the everyday items and pulled out the legal folder from the very back, held together with a rubber band that had started to crack from age. Catherine's neat handwriting on the label read estate documents. Inside I found copies of our will, detailed beneficiary information, instructions for what should happen to the house, the cars, the investment accounts, even that antique clock that had belonged to Catherine's father. We put all this together 3 years ago when she first got diagnosed, working with our lawyer to make sure everything would be simple and clear. We'd done it with love and hope and the foolish assumption that our children would be there when it mattered most. I sat on the edge of our bed and opened that folder with hands that had started shaking. Daniel's name appeared as primary beneficiary on the main investment account. For $100,000 we'd saved over decades of careful planning and sacrifice. Both kids were listed for the house, set to inherit it equally. The cabin upstate, the one they never visited but always asked about when tax bills arrived, that was earmarked for them too. I held those papers and felt something crack open inside my chest. Betrayal has a physical sensation. I realized. It pounds in your ears and steals your breath. I got up and pulled down a storage container from the closet shelf. Inside were stacks of old photographs, years and years of family history. Holiday gatherings at the cabin. Birthday parties in this house. Catherine holding infant Daniel. Then baby Rachel, her face glowing with new mother joy. Me, and the kids building snowmen in the backyard. Rachel pulling on Catherine's hand, maybe 6 years old, missing her front teeth. Daniel asleep against my shoulder during a camping trip. A comic book sliding off his lap. We'd been a real family once. All of us together, connected, whole. Maybe I'd been blind to how it had all fallen apart, how the threads had loosened and snapped one by one. Love doesn't always end dramatically. Sometimes it just fades like old photographs left in sunlight. So gradually you don't notice until suddenly you can't remember what the original looked like anymore. I found a picture of Catherine and Rachel at Rachel's college graduation. Catherine had her arm around our daughter, both of them smiling wide, proud and happy and full of hope for the future. That woman in the photograph, my wife, had deserved better than dying alone and being buried by one person. I set the photo aside and picked up my phone. Nearly midnight. But I didn't care. I dialed Thomas Brennan, our family attorney for over 25 years. The call went to voicemail. I left a message, my voice steady despite everything. Thomas, it's Robert Morrison. I need to make some changes to my will immediately. It can't wait. Call me first thing tomorrow morning. I hung up and stood at the bedroom window, staring out into darkness. Moonlight caught the rose bushes, Catherine's pride and joy. They looked withered now, like they were grieving too. I should probably prune them back, give them a chance to recover in spring. But not tonight. Tonight, I'd let the dead petals stay where they fell. Tomorrow, I'd start cutting away everything that no longer belonged. Thomas Brennan's office had that specific smell of old books and furniture polish, the kind of place where important decisions get made and locked into legal permanence. Thomas had known us for decades. He'd handled our first mortgage on this house, helped Catherine start her small catering business, processed paperwork for the cabin, eventually drafted our entire estate plan. Reliable, detail-oriented, and like me, somewhat tired people who only showed warmth when they wanted something. He glanced up as I walked into his office, standing quickly with obvious surprise on his face. "Robert," he said, coming around his desk to shake my hand. "I got your message. Please, sit down." I took the leather chair across from his desk and set my coat aside. Thomas settled back into his own chair, hands folded on the desk between us, expression careful and professional. "I understand you want to make revisions to your will." "That's correct. Major revisions." He pulled out a legal pad and a pen. "What kind of changes are we talking about?" "I want Daniel and Rachel completely removed as beneficiaries. Every account, every property, everything." Thomas went very still. His pen hovered over paper. "That's significant, Robert. Are you certain?" "I buried my wife alone yesterday," I said, my voice coming out harder than I'd intended. "Our children didn't come. Not Daniel, not Rachel. They were busy. Rachel was getting spa treatments and posting photos of champagne brunches. Daniel was playing golf. They couldn't spare 2 hours to say goodbye to their mother." Thomas set his pen down carefully. "I see. So you want them removed from everything. The investment accounts, the house, the cabin, all of it?" "Yes, all of it." He picked up his pen again and started making notes. "Do you have someone else in mind to inherit?" I thought about Marcus, Rachel's son, my grandson, the only grandchild who ever visited just to visit, not because he needed money or favor. The kid who'd shown up last summer and mowed the lawn without being asked, who brought Catherine library books and actually discussed them with her later, who once told her he liked talking to her more than most people his own age. "Yes," I said, "I want to establish a trust for Marcus. Everything goes to him. The house, the cabin, all the financial accounts. I want it structured so his parents can't touch it, can't manipulate him into giving them access." "That can absolutely be arranged," Thomas said, writing steadily. "We'll create an irrevocable trust in Marcus's name. He won't have full access until he reaches 30, though we can include provisions for educational expenses and medical emergencies before then. Does that work for you? That works perfectly. We spent the next 90 minutes going through details, page after page of legal language, clause after clause. I didn't hesitate on anything. When you just buried your wife completely alone, when you stood beside an open grave without a single child present, a stack of legal documents doesn't intimidate you. Nothing feels risky after that. As we wrapped up, Thomas looked at me across his desk with something like concern. Robert, I have to say, most people your age in this situation want to forgive, want to keep peace in the family. I kept peace for 63 years. I told him quietly, and all it did was teach them I didn't matter. He didn't ask any more questions after that. By the time I left his office, the sun had moved high overhead, bright and indifferent. I stood outside on the sidewalk for a moment, letting cold air hit my face. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't angry either. Not really. I was just finished. Done waiting for my children to become people they'd clearly never intended to be. Done confusing duty with love. Done writing checks with my heart and receiving nothing but silence in return. My footsteps echoed as I walked to my car. The leather seat felt warmer than usual from the sun. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, watching strangers move past on the sidewalk. A man walked by holding his young daughter's hand, the little girl chattering away while he smiled down at her. I didn't feel envious exactly. Just noticed it, the way you notice a song you used to know but don't listen to anymore. That night, I slept without the television on for the first time in weeks. Without Catherine's cardigan draped over the chair where I could see it. Without her book on the nightstand. The silence was still there, but it had changed somehow. It didn't hurt quite as much. Not anymore. The old filing cabinet in the hallway had always been Catherine's domain. 3 drawers, each one labeled in her precise handwriting. Household, taxes, family records. I'd avoided opening that last drawer since she died, but now I pulled it open slowly. The metal groaned slightly reluctant. Inside were folders packed with paper, years and years of documentation. Receipts, canceled checks, letters from banks, old birthday cards tucked between mortgage statements. Catherine had kept everything, not obsessively, just thoroughly. She believed in having proof, in keeping records. Paper doesn't lie, she used to say. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out the folder marked Daniel, education, and business. Then the one labeled Rachel, home and living, both in Catherine's handwriting, both thick with documents. I started reading, and with each page, the full picture came into focus sharper and more painful. $15,000, dated 2004. Check made out for Rachel's wedding. She'd told us it would be small and simple. That wedding had a 5-tier cake and a string quartet. $8,000, 2008. Rachel's roof needed emergency repairs. She'd said. The baby's room was getting soaked. I'd transferred the money within an hour of her call. $13,000, 2012. Braces for Marcus. $5,000 more in 2014 for some robotic summer camp she insisted was crucial for his future. Another year, another crisis. Rachel's husband lost his job. $22,000 sent immediately when she called crying about possibly losing their house. You always save us, Dad, she'd whisper on the phone. We don't know what we'd do without you. I believed every word. Daniel's folder was even thicker. $25,000 for seed money in some tech startup that crashed within 6 months. Catherine had warned me about that one. I'd sent it anyway, not wanting Daniel to resent me for not believing in him. Cars, down payments, graduate school tuition. Medical bills when his daughter broke her arm. Help with taxes when he fell behind. I'd written every check without hesitation, without keeping score, because that's what parents do. That's what love looks like, I thought. Looking at it all spread out now, line after line of financial help, I had to ask myself when exactly I'd stopped being their father and started being their emergency fund. Maybe it had always been that way. Maybe I'd been too willing to be used, too eager to prove my love through money instead of boundaries. Not once, not a single time, had either of them ever refused my help. But they both refused to come say goodbye to the woman who'd given them life. I put most of the files back, except one. The folder marked Marcus. Inside was a note he'd written when he was maybe 12 years old. Pencil on line paper, folded in half. Grandpa Robert, thank you for teaching me how to fix my bike. I think you are very smart and kind. Someday I will help you like you help everyone else. I held that paper for a long time, studying his careful handwriting, remembering that summer afternoon in the garage. He was 20 now. I didn't know if he even remembered writing this note, but I remembered. I kept it because it was real, because it mattered. I tried to be fair, splitting everything equally between my kids. That's what people always say, right? Be fair. Don't play favorites. Treat them the same. But what if fairness isn't sameness? What if real fairness means giving your legacy to the person who actually values it, who sees you as more than a checkbook with feet? Catherine used to say something I never fully understood until now. Legacy isn't what you leave behind, she'd tell me. It's who you leave it with. I used to think she was just talking about assets and inheritance. Now I understood she meant something deeper. The house felt different that afternoon. Smaller somehow. Not because anything had physically changed, but because I'd started seeing it without all the accumulated weight of memory and obligation. For years, I'd kept every gift the kids had ever given me. Handmade cards from elementary school, crayon drawings, coffee mugs with world's best dad printed on them. But love isn't in objects. It's in actions. And their recent actions had all said the same thing loud and clear. You're useful when we need you. Otherwise, you're invisible. I spent that afternoon packing up 3 cardboard boxes with those old gifts. Not to throw them away. Not yet. Just to create space. Room for something new to grow. Whatever that might be. That night, I didn't pour whiskey. I didn't need artificial courage anymore. I made tea instead. Real tea the way Catherine liked it. Loose leaves in a proper teapot. Steeped exactly the right amount of time. I carried it to the living room and sat with my legs stretched out, the smell of bergamot gentle in the air. For the first time in months, I felt something like the beginning of peace. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. A voice I hadn't heard in probably 6 months, young and uncertain. Grandpa? Marcus. I set down a utility bill I'd been reviewing and focused completely on the phone. Hey there, kiddo. Everything okay? A long pause. Then his voice came back shakier. I heard about Grandma. I'm so sorry I didn't know sooner. Nobody told me. I waited, giving him space to continue. I didn't know she'd pass until yesterday. Marcus went on, words tumbling out fast. Mom never said anything. She mentioned Grandma was sick, but not that it was that serious. She died almost 3 weeks ago, Marcus. The funeral was last Tuesday. I know, he said, and I could hear genuine pain in his voice. I'm so sorry. A moment of heavy silence sat between us. Then, can I come see you? If that's okay? Of course it's okay, I told him. You're always welcome here. He showed up less than an hour later, taller than I remembered, wearing jeans and an old jacket, hair a little too long. He hugged me hard, the kind of hug that says I should have been here sooner. I hugged him back just as hard. We sat in the living room. I made lemonade from scratch the way Catherine used to, and Marcus looked around the house like he was seeing it for the first time. Even though he'd been here hundreds of times growing up, I missed the funeral, he said finally, staring at his glass. I'll never forgive myself for that. You didn't choose to miss it, I said gently. Nobody told you. He looked up at me, his eyes searching my face. Did Mom really not come? I nodded once, not trusting myself to say more. Marcus stared down at the coffee table, running his thumb along a water ring someone had left years ago. She told me they handled everything. He said quietly that there was some work conflict, but it was all taken care of. I should have known better. I should have called you. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. He sat up straighter, determination crossing his face. I want to do something. For Grandma, for you, whatever you need. You're doing it, I told him simply. You're here. He looked unconvinced, like that wasn't nearly enough. I hesitated, then stood and retrieved a manila envelope from my desk drawer. Inside were the trust papers, drafted but not yet filed. I hadn't planned to show them to him yet, but something told me it was time. I handed him the envelope. He opened it slowly, his forehead creasing as he read the first page. Then his eyes went wide. "Grandpa, what is this?" "It's my plan," I said simply. "This is everything. The house, the cabin, all the accounts." "Why me?" His voice cracked. "Why not Mom or Uncle Daniel?" I could have listed all their failures, all their absences and excuses and cruelty. But I chose a simpler truth. Because you're the only one who came back without being asked. You're the only one who sees me as more than an ATM. He stared at the documents, then set them down carefully like they might shatter. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet. Just remember who you are. Remember what real love looks like when you see it." His eyes filled with tears. He wiped them quickly with his sleeve, embarrassed. We sat together in comfortable silence for a long time, the way Catherine and I used to sit in the evenings, two people who didn't need words to feel connected. As Marcus was leaving, he turned back at the front door. "Can I come by this weekend? Maybe we could make pancakes like Grandma used to make." I smiled, feeling something warm spread through my chest. "We'll use the good syrup too." Rachel showed up the next day. I'd known she would eventually, not because she missed me, not because she needed to grieve, but because I'd stopped responding to her messages, stopped being available on demand. She arrived without warning, her expensive SUV kicking up gravel in the driveway, moving too fast like she was late for something more important than this. She didn't knock, just walked like she still lived here, like nothing had changed. "Dad," she said, dropping her designer purse on the hall table. "I've been trying to reach you for days." I didn't look up from the laundry I was folding, taking my time matching socks. "I've been busy." She made a scoffing sound. "Busy with what?" I didn't answer right away. She moved to the kitchen, helped herself to water from the tap, leaned against the counter like she owned the place. "So," she said after a minute, "is it true?" I looked at her directly. "Is what true?" She tapped her manicured nails against the glass. "Marcus said you're changing your will, cutting Daniel and me out completely." "Yes," I said, going back to my laundry. "That's exactly what I'm doing." Rachel laughed, but it sounded forced, almost panicky. "Are you serious? After everything we've been through together? Everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me?" I set down the shirt I'd been folding. "You didn't come to your mother's funeral, Rachel. You didn't send flowers. You didn't call. You were getting spa treatments and drinking mimosas with your friends." "I had an appointment," she started to say. I cut her off. "Yes, I saw the photos. You posted them on Facebook while they were lowering your mother into the ground." She blinked but didn't deny it. "Want to talk about what you've done for me?" I continued. "You've sent me grocery lists and bills and requests for money. I paid them all, every single time, without asking for anything in return. That's what family does." She snapped. "Helps each other." "No," I said softly. "That's what parents do. And I did it for decades. You never once asked how I was doing, if I needed anything, what my life was like after your mother got sick." She fell silent. "Your mother built half this house with her own hands," I went on. "She didn't have much, but she had dignity. She taught you that respect is shown through actions, not just words. And you couldn't give her 2 hours. You couldn't show up for her goodbye." "That's not fair," Rachel said, but her voice had lost its edge. "So you're really doing this? Just cutting us out?" "No," I said. "Not just like that. I spent decades giving without receiving anything real in return. I sat alone at your mother's funeral. I stood beside her grave and waited. You never came. This isn't sudden. This is the result of years of being treated like I don't matter." She crossed her arms, trying to look composed, but her mouth was tight. "You're punishing us." "No, Rachel. I'm setting boundaries. I'm giving everything to Marcus." Her face went pale. She let out another forced laugh. "He's just a kid. What does he know about managing property?" "He knows how to show up," I said. "He knows how to care about people without keeping a scorecard." The silence that followed felt thick enough to cut. I thought she might cry or start yelling. Instead, she grabbed her purse. "Well," she said, adjusting her sunglasses even though we were inside, "I hope this makes you feel powerful." "It doesn't," I said calmly. It makes me feel peaceful. She left without another word, the door closing hard behind her. I waited until I heard her car pull away before I picked up the trust documents on the table and set them next to my folded laundry. Later that evening, I found a note on the doorstep. No envelope, no stamp, just paper. You don't understand what it's like balancing everything. We tried our best. Maybe we failed, but this isn't the answer. I read it twice, then folded it and placed it in a drawer marked miscellaneous. Because that's what it was now. Just another piece of paper. Too little, far too late. Daniel appeared 2 days later. Unlike Rachel, he knocked politely, waited for me to answer, but he hadn't come alone. Behind him stood his wife, Jennifer, wearing her practice smile and a scarf that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. She nodded at me like I was someone she'd agreed to meet as a courtesy. "Dad," Daniel said, his voice carefully controlled. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside without speaking. He looked around the house like he was touring a museum of someone else's life, someone he barely remembered. I led them to the living room. They didn't take off their coats. I heard from Rachel. Daniel began settling onto the edge of the sofa. And from Marcus, too. "I imagine you did," I said. He cleared his throat. "I think there might be some misunderstanding here." I said nothing, just waited. Jennifer crossed her legs elegantly, her diamond rings catching afternoon light. "We understand this is an emotional time, Robert. Grief affects people in difficult ways. You didn't come to her funeral either," I said to her. She blinked. "I had an important client dinner. International deal. Couldn't be rescheduled." Daniel shifted forward. "Dad, listen. I know I should have been there. I know I messed up. But I thought maybe if I gave you space, you'd—" "No," I interrupted. "You thought if you ignore it long enough, someone else would handle it. You thought your mother's death was someone else's problem." He looked away. I waited alone at the funeral home. I continued. "Sat in that room your mother and I built with our own savings and effort, while they lowered her into the ground. Not one of you showed up." Daniel opened his mouth, but Jennifer put her hand on his knee. "Let him speak," she said quietly. "We understand you're upset," Jennifer said, taking over the conversation. "And you have every right to change your will. But let's be realistic. Marcus is only 20. He's not experienced. He doesn't understand how to manage a trust or handle property. He could be taken advantage of." I raised an eyebrow. "By whom?" Jennifer didn't flinch. "By people who know he's inherited something valuable. People like you, I thought, but didn't say." Daniel tried again. "Dad, I know I disappointed you. I know I haven't been the best son, but this is extreme. Don't you think?" "No," I said softly. "What's extreme is abandoning your mother. What's extreme is living your life like the people who raise you are disposable conveniences." He swallowed hard. "So that's it? You're just done with us?" "You're done with me," I corrected. "I'm just acknowledging that fact." Jennifer stood up, her composure cracking slightly. "This could get legally complicated, Robert. Laws about inheritance, about family rights." "It won't," I said, meeting her gaze. "The paperwork is clean. My lawyer is excellent. And I've had plenty of time to think this through." Daniel looked older than I remembered. Thinner around the eyes, his face showing stress I'd never noticed before. "I thought you believed in forgiveness," he said quietly. "I do forgive you," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean giving you access to everything I worked for. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen." They didn't argue after that. They stood, thanked me with strained politeness, and left. Only after the door closed did I feel my hand shaking. Not from fear or doubt, from release. I sat by the window as afternoon faded into evening, watching the last light drain from the sky. The rose bushes looked almost completely bare. Winter was coming fast. Catherine would have said they'll bloom again next year. And they would. But not for everyone. Not anymore. The bank had that particular smell of air conditioning and quiet authority. The kind of place where old money moves in whispers and nobody raises their voice. I hadn't been inside in nearly 2 years, but they recognized me immediately. "Mr. Morrison," the receptionist said, standing quickly. "Mr. Patterson will see you right away." I nodded and waited by tall windows overlooking Main Street. Outside, people hurried through their daily routines, heads down, focused. Inside, everything felt suspended, like important moments were always about to happen but never quite did. Mr. Patterson, Stephen, appeared within minutes, sharp in his tailored suit, like someone who'd never spilled coffee on anything in his life. Robert, he greeted me warmly, shaking my hand with practiced firmness. I was surprised by your call. Good, I said. Surprise means I'm doing something right. He smiled uncertainly and led me to his office. Glass walls, a walnut desk, a single-framed photo of what looked like his golden retriever. Catherine would have appreciated that. One honest face in a room full of financial abstractions. I understand you want to make some changes, he said, opening my account file on his computer. I've already made them, I replied. I'm here to make sure they're executed without delay. He reviewed his notes, eyebrows rising as he read. You've revoked all linked transfers to your children, removed them as beneficiaries on all accounts, and established an irrevocable trust for your grandson Marcus. That's a substantial shift. I'm a substantial person, I said. He chuckled softly. Yes, you are. I leaned forward slightly. I want safeguards, Stephen. Ironclad protections. No appeals, no family representatives pressuring him 5 years from now when they realize what they've lost. We can absolutely structure that way. He assured me the trust will control disbursements, limiting them to education, healthcare, and housing until Marcus turns 30. After that, full access, but still protected from creditors and family claims. Would you like a co-trustee? No, I said firmly. Marcus can hire a financial advisor if he wants one, but the decisions are his. I trust him more than I trust institutions. That wasn't meant as an insult to Stephen, just a statement of fact. He adjusted his glasses. You understand this can't be easily undone. That's exactly the point, I said. We went through everything systematically. Signatures, dates, final confirmations. It felt like building something solid, not a house or a business, but something quieter and stronger. A boundary that wouldn't bend under pressure or soften with time. Before I left, Stephen folded his hands on the desk. Robert, if I may ask, and you can absolutely tell me it's none of my business, but are you doing this out of anger? I considered the question carefully. No, I said, I'm doing it out of clarity. He nodded slowly. That's rare in my experience. It's not rare, I said more gently. It's just late. Most people wait too long. When I stepped out into afternoon sunlight, something felt different. Cleaner somehow. Lighter. Across the street was a coffee shop Catherine, and I used a visit after running errands. I hadn't been there in years. The place had changed, younger staff, louder music, different menu. But I walked in anyway and ordered cappuccino. I sat near the window watching the street. A woman in her 30s walked past pushing a stroller, her coat flapping open in the wind. She looked tired but determined. Familiar somehow. I sipped my coffee slowly. No phone in my hand. No urgency driving me anywhere. Just a cup, a chair, an hour that belonged entirely to me. They always told you the stage of life would be quiet. Nobody mentioned how loud peace could feel when you finally found it. Lorraine Campbell lived 2 houses down and had for almost 50 years. We weren't the kind of neighbors who called each other best friends, but we'd shared enough conversations over back fences and traded enough knowing glances that the silence between us had become its own language. She knocked around 5 in the evening, carrying a tin of shortbread cookies and her usual gentle curiosity. I saw Daniel's car here yesterday. She said as soon as I opened the door. Did he bring flowers or just lawyers? Neither, I said, stepping aside to let her in. He brought his wife and rehearsed apologies. Oh, she said, and that single word carried volumes of judgment. We sat in the living room, and I poured tea, chamomile for her, strong black for me. She set the cookie tin between us, but didn't open it immediately. She was waiting. I told him everything, I said, about the will changes, that they're completely out, that Marcus inherits everything. Lorraine let out a long breath. About damn time, Robert. I'm sorry, she added quickly, softening. But I've watched you chase their approval for years. Babysitting when you had your own health issues to deal with. writing checks while they took luxury vacations, smiling when they forgot your birthday. I kept thinking you'll finally have enough one day. Thank God that day came. I didn't snap, I said carefully. I just finally saw things clearly. Lorraine smiled. Better way to put it. We sat quietly for a moment, listening to the house settle around us, the faint sounds of wind outside. Do you regret it? She asked eventually. I shook my head. I regret not doing it 20 years ago. She opened the cookie tin finally. The shortbread was perfect, buttery, and delicate. We each took one and ate thoughtfully. You know, Lorraine said, my nephew tried to convince me to sell this house last year. Said it was too much for me to handle. That I should move to one of those senior communities by the lake. Everything done for you, Aunt Lorraine, he kept saying. Laundry, meals, group activities. What did you tell him? I said I'd rather die in a house full of my own memories and choices than live somewhere that smells like industrial cleaner and other people's schedules. I laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere genuine. Lorraine leaned in closer. You and I, we come from a generation that understands what endurance costs. We wore ourselves down raising people who think love is measured in gifts and gratitude is optional. I nodded slowly. You're not cruel, Robert, she continued. They'll say you are. They'll whisper about the man who cut off his own children. But what they won't say is that you were also the one who kept them afloat through every storm while they never asked if you were drowning. I blinked, but nothing fell from my eyes. We talked for another hour about easier things. Her vegetable garden, the state of the neighborhood, the squirrels destroying her gutter again. When she left, I hugged her longer than usual, grateful for someone who understood without needing everything explained. That night, I didn't turn on the television. I pulled out an old letter Catherine had written me during a business trip I'd taken years ago, tucked in a drawer I hadn't opened in forever. Robert, the house is never empty when you're in it. You're the foundation, the walls, and the lock on the door. Even when it feels like nobody sees you, I do. I always will. I read it 3 times before sliding it carefully back into its envelope. The house was quiet around me, but not empty. Not anymore. It started with something simple. A walk. Not to accomplish anything. Not to run an errand or pick something up. Just to walk because I wanted to. The morning air bit slightly, but not unpleasantly. The kind of cold that wakes you up rather than driving you back inside. I wore Catherine's old windbreaker. Too big on me. Frayed at the cuffs, but comforting in its familiar weight. I walked through the neighborhood slowly. Not like exercise, but like someone relearning what still exists. The Henderson house still had those blue shutters. The Martinez porch swing still creaked the same way Catherine used to comment on, saying we should fix ours before that one finally breaks. Neither of us ever did. At the park, I sat on a bench under the old elm that had split during a storm back in 1909. It still leaned stubbornly to one side, refusing to die. Across the path, 2 young mothers pushed strollers, deep in conversation about sleep schedules and preschool applications. They didn't look my way, and I didn't mind. I wasn't part of their world anymore and didn't want to be. A woman sat down on the other end of my bench, maybe mid-40s, with that tired but functioning look I remember from my own middle years. The kind of person who makes lists constantly but forgets why they walked into rooms. We sat in silence for several minutes. Then she said, not looking at me, do you come here often? Used to, I said, before people stopped needing rides everywhere and casseroles for every occasion. She laughed softly. That sounds nice, actually. She paused. I'm here to clear my head. My daughter told me yesterday she doesn't think she wants children. Said she doesn't see the point. I raised my eyebrows slightly. What did you say? I told her I didn't see the point of her getting 5 tattoos, but I managed to keep that opinion to myself. I smiled. But you didn't really keep it to yourself, did you? She laughed again, more freely. No, I didn't. We talked for maybe 15 minutes about nothing consequential, and everything that mattered. She left first with a small wave. I watched her disappear around the trail curve and felt something strange. A small opening in my chest, like a door frozen shut for years, finally cracking open. That night, I made dinner just for myself. Not quick food, not leftovers warmed up. A proper meal. I set the table with real dishes, lit a candle for no reason except I wanted to. I played the radio softly, the same station Catherine preferred. I ate in silence, but not lonely silence. Just alone. There's a difference nobody tells you about until you live it. Afterward, I went into the den, Catherine's favorite room. Books everywhere, half-finished crossword puzzles, paper stacked in her particular system. I hadn't touched much since she died. Tonight I did. I dusted, opened windows, let fresh air sweep through. Then I sat at her desk and wrote a letter to myself. Just a few lines. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are not required to earn peace through constant exhaustion. I folded the paper and tucked it into the desk drawer beside her last crossword puzzle. Half finished. The clue for 14 down, still blank. End of one chapter. Start of another. I didn't need to solve it. I was living the answer. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, his handwriting immediately recognizable. Marcus had always pressed too hard with pens, like the words wouldn't count unless they left an impression on the paper beneath. It sat between junk mail and a grocery store flyer. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it while water boiled for tea. I didn't open it right away. Let it sit there the way I used to let birthday cards sit unopened on the mantel until after breakfast, stretching out the mystery. When the tea was ready, I sat down and carefully opened the envelope. Dear Grandpa, I wanted to write this instead of texting. I know I could have just said it when I saw you, but I was still trying to find the right words. And after thinking for a few days, I don't think there are perfect words. So here are the honest ones. Thank you. Not just for the trust or the house or the cabin, though I understand what a huge thing that is, but for something else. For being the one person in this family who never asked me to be anything except exactly who I am. You and Grandma always made space for me. Even when my parents were pushing me to be more polished, more ambitious, more strategic about everything. You were never strategic with me. You were just real. I didn't know Grandma was that sick. I didn't know she died. I still don't know how to process that. And I'm so angry at Mom for not telling me, for deciding it didn't matter. I would have been there. You know I would have been. I don't know what made you choose me for this, but I promise I won't waste it. I won't let you down. I want to take care of this house. I want to learn what you and Grandma built here. I want to understand the kind of strength it takes to keep showing up when nobody else does. I love you. I don't say that enough, but I do. I always have. I read it 3 times. Once with dry eyes. Once with my hand pressed against my chest. Once with tears sliding silently down my face. Then I set the letter on the mantel and stood looking at it like it was something sacred. Because in this house, letters like that were rare. Not because love didn't exist, but because it had gone too long unspoken, assumed, stretched thin until it barely connected anyone anymore. I didn't need the money I'd set aside for retirement. Not really. But I needed this. I needed to know that something I'd done, some small, quiet investment of time and genuine care, hadn't been completely swallowed by ungrateful children and performative holidays. That night I sat in Catherine's favorite chair and watched shadows move across the floor as sun dropped behind the trees. Marcus was the kind of young man Catherine would have been proud of. Not loud, not showy, but steady and present. That last quality mattered more than anything. Being present, not just physically showing up, but actually seeing people. I knew he wouldn't waste what I was giving him. Not because of the monetary value, but because he'd tasted what it felt like to be forgotten, to be an afterthought. People who've experienced that don't let things rot in silence. They plant something meaningful. They remember. I closed my eyes and listened to the soft creaks of the house as temperature dropped outside, wood shifting, settling, breathing its evening sounds. It was a noise I once found lonely. Now it sounded like life continuing, like legacy whispering back. Evenings had developed a new rhythm since Catherine died. No phone calls from Rachel asking if I could pick up Marcus from school because her yoga class ran over. Not because she actually needed help, but because it was convenient. No messages from Daniel wondering if I'd mind covering an unexpected car repair bill. Never urgent enough to justify real panic, but always just enough to apply gentle pressure. The silence had become gentle instead of oppressive. That particular evening, I set the table for one. Not because loneliness forced me to, but because I finally understood the difference between eating and being nourished. I made roast chicken, real roast from scratch, not something reheated from a box. Potatoes, too, using rosemary from a garden Catherine had started back when we still believed weekends were for laughter instead of endless errands. I lit a candle even though I didn't need one, just wanted it. Halfway through dinner, the house was quiet enough that I could hear the old clock ticking in the hallway, the one from our first apartment together. How loud it had seemed when we lay awake at night, with almost no money, no health insurance, no real plan except loving each other. Catherine always said we'd build something even if it took forever. It had taken forever, and it had been beautiful. After dinner, I washed dishes slowly, not rushing, not thinking about whether someone else needed the kitchen next. I dried them carefully, put everything away in its proper place. Then I did something I hadn't done in literal decades. I danced. Not long, but enough. I turned on the old record player, the one Catherine had refused to replace even though it skipped every third line. She'd said it had character. She was right. I danced in the living room barefoot, my arms raised slightly, my body stiff in places I didn't remember being stiff before. My knees reminded me sharply that I was 63 years old, but my heart felt 20 again. I danced like nobody was watching, because for once, nobody was. Not to judge, not to need something, not to wait impatiently for me to stop, so they could hand me another bill, or favor, or crisis to solve. Just me, in the house I'd maintained, in the quiet I'd earned. I only stopped when I noticed the fireplace, cold and unused, a layer of old ash still there from last winter when Catherine was alive. I knelt down and cleaned it out carefully, swept away everything old and dead. It felt ritualistic, almost sacred. I found a small note tucked into the kindling basket, something I hadn't touched in over a year. Catherine's handwriting, short and simple. Keep dancing, even if it's just in the kitchen. The world will try to make you forget who you are. Don't let it. I sat back on my heels, hands covered in ash, tears welling but not quite spilling. She had known, maybe not the specific details of how things would unfold, but she'd known what life would try to do to me, how it would try to make me smaller, more accommodating, more invisible. And she'd left this message like a trail marker in dark woods, helping me find my way. I sat there on the rug for a while, looking at the empty hearth. Not empty, I corrected myself. Waiting. Later that night, I opened the bedroom window just an inch or two, letting autumn air sweep in. The kind that smells like dying leaves with something cleaner underneath. I lay under the quilt Catherine had made back in '84 when I was working long hours, and the kids were still young, and I thought exhaustion was a badge of honor. Now I knew better. Now I understood that peace was a far better measure of a life well lived. My body was tired, but not in the old crushing way. Not the way it used to feel when other people's constant needs settled into my spine like a second skeleton I had to carry everywhere. This was good tired. Earned tired. The kind that comes after reclaiming something that always belonged to you. Not power, not revenge. Just your own name and the right to live inside it. If this story found you at the right moment, if you ever felt invisible in your own family, or wondered if setting boundaries makes you selfish, then you're not alone. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about finding yourself again after years of being lost in other people's expectations. And leave a comment about your own experience. Your voice matters. Sometimes the strongest act of love is finally the love you give to yourself. The love that says I matter too. I deserve dignity. And I'm worth fighting for.